When Ava Mitchell lost her job, it wasn't done quietly or kindly. It happened under the glaring, fluorescent lights of the 14th floor, conference room at Weston and Hale Advertising, in front of every member of the marketing department. Her boss, Gregory Shaw, a man with too much ego and too little integrity, stood at the front with his hands tucked into his tailored pockets. "Ava," he said sharply, "your campaign failed and the client's walking away. We can't afford that. You're done here." The words cut through her like cold steel. Before she could even respond, Gregory turned to the group. "Let this be a lesson," he added, voice dripping with fake authority. "Results matter more than effort." A few nervous laughs broke the tension. Some coworkers exchanged awkward glances. Others stared at their screens, pretending not to watch her humiliation unfold. Ava tried to speak, but security was already on the way. Gregory didn't even let her gather her things. "Pack it later," he barked. "We need your desk cleared by noon. You're a distraction." Those last words echoed in her head as she stood frozen, watching her professional world crumble around her. The marketing floor, where she had once stayed late nights perfecting slogans and designing pitches, now felt suffocating. Every pair of eyes that had once admired her work now looked at her with pity. As she turned toward the elevator, she noticed someone she'd barely spoken to before, Mr. Ellis, the janitor. He was an old man, always quiet, always polite, always invisible to most people in that building. But today he stopped, reached into his keyring, a massive tangle of brass and silver, and handed her one small brass key. He didn't say much, just 2 words that stuck in her mind forever. "It's time." Before she could ask what he meant, he nodded once and walked away. The sound of his mop bucket fading down the hall. Ava stood there, clutching the key. The tag on it read 12th floor storage. That floor had been closed off for years since Weston and Hale downsized. Nobody went there anymore. Something inside her, anger, curiosity, maybe both, told her to see where that key led. An hour later, she stood before the dusty door of the forgotten storage room. When she turned the key, the lock clicked open like it had been waiting just for her. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Stacks of old furniture, boxes of abandoned projects, and torn banners littered the space. And on one wall, faint under the grime, she saw something that froze her heart. Her own handwriting, her Phoenix campaign, the one Gregory had stolen, altered, and failed with. Her ideas, her words, her designs, all still there, untouched. For the first time that day, Ava smiled. She wasn't just fired, she was framed, and now she had proof.
Ava stepped deeper into the forgotten storage room, the dim light from the hallway barely cutting through the dust. She brushed her hand across the old whiteboard where her handwriting sprawled in blue. Marker. Phoenix, rebirth through vision. Her slogan. Her concept. Her passion project. The one that was supposed to change her career forever. Until Gregory Shaw stole it, slapped his name on it, and turned it into a disaster. Her pulse quickened as she explored the shelves. There were boxes marked with old project names, some dating back years. But in the corner, a small gray box caught her eye, labeled simply Mitchell. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were printed drafts, notebooks full of sketches, and her old company-issued tablet. She powered it on, half expecting it to be dead, but to her surprise, the screen flickered to life. There it was, her voice memos, time-stamped months before Gregory's presentation. Recordings of brainstorming sessions, notes, even late-night thoughts like, Phoenix represents renewal, rising from corporate burnout into creative freedom. Proof. Undeniable, dated proof that the entire campaign had been hers. Ava sank into an old swivel chair, staring at the documents. She had been made to feel small, disposable. But now she knew she had something powerful. As she scrolled through the files, she noticed something else. Client feedback emails that Gregory had hidden. Messages from major brands praising her original pitch before he twisted it. He hadn't just failed her, he had sabotaged her to protect his ego. Her anger simmered, no longer raw and desperate, but cold and focused. She took photos, copied files to a flash drive, and backed up everything to the cloud. Then she turned off the lights and closed the door behind her, slipping the brass key into her pocket. That night, Ava sat in her tiny apartment staring at her laptop. The city lights reflected in her eyes as she mapped out what would come next. She could expose Gregory right now, leak the evidence, call the press, humiliate him the way he did her. But that would only make her a headline for a week. She wanted something lasting, She wanted rebirth. The name Phoenix echoed in her mind again. It wasn't just a campaign anymore. It was her story, her second chance. She pulled out a notepad and started writing. Phoenix Media Group, a company that stood for creativity, integrity, and resilience. It sounded impossible. She had no office, no investors, barely enough savings to cover rent. But she also had fire. The same fire that Gregory tried to crush in front of everyone. By sunrise, her plan was clear. She would build her own firm, from the ground up. And when she rose, she'd make sure the world knew who had truly created Phoenix. Ava Mitchell wouldn't just get even. She'd build an empire from the ashes. 2 weeks had passed since Ava found the storage room. Every night after work, she poured her time and energy into her dream, creating her own agency, Phoenix Media Group. Her tiny one-bedroom apartment in downtown, Chicago had transformed into a chaotic mix of notes, sketches, coffee cups, and hope. She worked part-time as a receptionist at Vanguard Ventures, a private investment firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And more importantly, it gave her access to people who understood money, business, and ambition. During lunch breaks, she'd study how the investors pitched, how they sold ideas, how they built trust. She took notes quietly, soaking it all in like a student studying a new language, the language of power. Every dollar of her severance went into registering her new company. She maxed out her last credit card to hire a freelance designer to create a logo, a golden phoenix rising from fire. When she saw it for the first time, something inside her shifted. The bird wasn't just a symbol, it was her reflection, burned once but now unstoppable. Still, the nights were hard. There were moments when she questioned everything. When bills piled up, when her old coworkers ignored her calls, when the world felt too big and she felt too small. But each time doubt crept in, she'd open her laptop and stare at the old files from the 12th floor. Reminders of how far she'd come and what had been stolen from her. Then, one rainy Friday morning, a miracle disguised as an email arrived. A marketing director from Brightwave Electronics, a company she once pitched under Weston and Hale, wrote, "We're looking for a fresh perspective. We heard about your new firm. Could you show us what you're working on?" Her heart nearly stopped. Brightwave was one of the biggest clients Weston and Hale had ever had, and they were coming to her. She barely slept that night. She reworked her old Phoenix concept into something cleaner, bolder, more emotionally charged. She wanted her presentation to scream rebirth. At sunrise, she printed every slide, memorized every line, and walked into Brightwave's office wearing the same determination she once brought to Weston and Hale. When the pitch ended, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause broke out. They didn't just like it, they loved it. Ava signed her first contract that afternoon. It wasn't massive, but it was real. A seed. A sign that she was on the right path. That evening, she stood by her apartment window, rain streaking down the glass, the city lights glowing like embers below. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was running from something. She was running toward it. And in the quiet of her room, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Ava couldn't stop smiling as she left Brightwave's office that afternoon. For months, she'd lived on the edge, juggling bills, drinking too much coffee, and sleeping too little. But now she finally had something solid. Her first client. Her first step back into the world she had been thrown out of. She celebrated that night with cheap takeout and sparkling water in her tiny apartment. No champagne, no crowd, no noise. Just her laptop, and a quiet sense of victory. As the city buzzed outside, she opened her notebook and began to plan the next phase. Phoenix Media Group would need a small team. People she could trust, creatives who understood her vision. She made a list of names. At the top was Lena Torres, a designer she'd worked with at Weston and Hale, one of the few who had spoken up for her after Gregory Shaw humiliated her. Ava reached out to her the next morning. "Lena, it's Ava. I'm starting something new, my own firm. I have one client and 1,000 ideas. Are you in?" The answer came instantly. "Always believed in you. Count me in." Within days, Lena was on board, followed by 2 more freelancers. Ava found through online networks, a copywriter and a data strategist. They met in coffee shops, public libraries, and once even in Ava's apartment, where pizza boxes doubled as file trays. The early days were messy but magical. Every small win felt huge, every setback a lesson. When Brightwave's campaign launched, it went viral within hours. Social media lit up with praise for the creativity, the emotion, the rebirth message. It didn't just impress Brightwave, it caught the attention of others. 2 new companies reached out within the week. Suddenly, Ava wasn't just running a startup, she was leading a movement. Her company's name began circulating in business circles. People wanted to know who this new agency was, the one that came out of nowhere and made waves so fast. One evening, as Ava and her small team sat around her kitchen table discussing a new proposal, Lena looked up from her laptop and grinned. You realize what this means, right? We're officially competition for Weston and Hale. Ava paused, her pen midair. The name still made her stomach twist, but this time, it wasn't with fear, it was with fire. She had no interest in revenge, not yet. Right now, it was about building, about proving she could rise without tearing anyone down. But somewhere deep inside, she knew the day would come, the day she would walk back into that building, not as a victim, but as a conqueror. For now, she simply smiled and said, "Let them notice. The Phoenix is just learning to fly." By the end of the 3rd month, Phoenix Media Group had gone from a single desk in Ava's apartment to a bright, co-working office overlooking the Chicago skyline. It wasn't big, but it was hers, a symbol of everything she had fought for. The golden Phoenix logo glimmered proudly on the glass door, and every time Ava walked through it, she felt the burn of motivation all over again. Her client list grew quickly. Brightwave's success story had spread through corporate circles like wildfire. Soon, companies that once dismissed her emails were now calling her. Each pitch she gave carried the same theme: rebirth, renewal, transformation, because that's what she lived. But even as Phoenix soared, shadows from the past began to stir. One afternoon, while preparing a presentation for a new tech client, Lena burst into Ava's office holding her phone. "Ava," she said, breathless, "you need to see this." It was an article on a major business site. Weston and Hale struggles after campaign failures. Key clients leave firm. Ava leaned back in her chair, staring at the headline. It was surreal. The same company that had humiliated her, the empire built on stolen ideas, was now crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance. She didn't smile, not yet. She wasn't ready to celebrate another's fall, not until her rise was complete. Still, she couldn't help but think of Gregory Shaw. Was he sweating under that expensive suit now? Blaming his team again? Probably. But this time the world was watching. Later that week, Ava received an unexpected call from Vanguard Ventures, the investment firm where she had once worked as a receptionist. "Ms. Mitchell?" the voice on the phone said. "We've been watching Phoenix's growth closely. The board wants to discuss a partnership opportunity." Ava's heart skipped. She'd gone from answering their phones to being invited to their boardroom. The next morning, she walked into Vanguard's headquarters wearing a sleek gray power suit. The same halls that once echoed her soft greetings now carried the confident rhythm of her heels. As she entered the boardroom, the executives stood to greet her, not as staff, but as equals. "Your company represents everything modern marketing should be," the chairman said. "We'd like to invest in Phoenix Media Group." Ava smiled, steady and professional on the outside, but inside, she felt an emotional storm. She had built this from nothing. No favors, no shortcuts, no mercy. By the time she left the meeting, the deal was sealed. Vanguard Ventures had officially invested in Phoenix Media Group. With that partnership came funding, expansion, and influence. As Ava stepped out into the cold evening air, she paused to look at her reflection in the glass door. She didn't just see herself anymore. She saw power, purpose, rebirth. The Phoenix had not only risen, it had begun to burn bright enough for everyone to see. The weeks following the Vanguard deal were a blur of energy, opportunity, and sleepless nights. Phoenix Media Group was no longer a small startup hustling for survival. It was a name that echoed in corporate boardrooms and marketing conventions across the country. With new funding came a new office, a 2-story glass building in downtown Chicago with minimalist design, creative lounges, and a rooftop space that looked out over the lake. Ava stood there one evening, watching the sunset reflect off the skyline. The colors looked like flames licking the sky. Orange, red, gold. Her flames. "Hard to believe, huh?" Lena said, joining her with 2 mugs of coffee. Ava smiled. "Sometimes I still think I'll wake up and this will all be gone." "It won't," Lena said firmly. "You earned this. Every inch of it." They stood in silence for a moment before Ava's phone buzzed with a new email notification. The subject line read, "Inquiry from Weston and Hale." Her breath caught. She opened it slowly. It was from their new business development manager, politely requesting a collaboration opportunity with Phoenix Media Group. No mention of Gregory Shaw, no apology. Just desperation thinly disguised as professionalism. Ava stared at the screen for a long time. They must really be sinking, Lena muttered when Ava showed her the message. Ava nodded. Yeah. And they want me to throw them a life raft. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. She archived the email without replying. Instead, she focused on her next big move, expansion. Phoenix was now strong enough to acquire smaller firms. She began scouting for one that shared her values. That's when she found Harbor Creative, a struggling but talented boutique agency in Boston. Its founder, a humble and honest designer named Ethan Cole, reminded Ava of herself from years ago. Raw, hopeful, and just one chance away from success. She flew out to meet him personally. Over coffee in a quiet corner cafe, Ethan said, "You're Ava Mitchell? I've been following Phoenix since your Brightwave campaign. You built something incredible." Ava smiled softly. It wasn't easy, but nothing worth having ever is. Within 2 weeks, she finalized the acquisition. Harbor Creative became Phoenix East, the company's first branch outside Chicago. The media began calling Ava the comeback queen of advertising. But she wasn't chasing headlines. She was chasing justice. The silent kind that doesn't scream revenge, but delivers it in results. Every client she won, every deal she closed, chipped away at the empire that once fired her. And yet, late at night, when everyone else had gone home, Ava sometimes found herself thinking about one thing. That small brass key from Mr. Ellis, the one that started it all. It still hung on her keychain, a reminder that every locked door can be opened if you have the courage to turn the key. The success of Phoenix Media Group spread like wildfire. Major brands were now competing for her attention, not the other way around. Her name appeared on magazine covers, podcasts, and business panels. But amid the glamour, Ava stayed grounded. She remembered every sleepless night, every humiliation, every "you're not good enough" that had fueled her rise. It was on a crisp Monday morning that her assistant, Jordan, walked into her office holding a stack of proposals. 2 new partnership requests, he said, placing them on her desk. One from Blue Peak Tech and... He hesitated. And one from Weston and Hale. Ava looked up slowly. From them again? Jordan nodded. This time it's signed by Gregory Shaw himself. She took the folder, her heartbeat steady but sharp. Inside was a letter, formal, almost apologetic. Gregory wanted Phoenix Media to handle Weston and Hale's upcoming rebranding campaign. The irony was poetic. The same man who fired her for a failed campaign now needed her to save his company. Ava placed the folder down and leaned back in her chair. "Schedule a meeting," she said calmly. Lena, standing nearby, raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to do that?" Ava smiled faintly. "Oh, I'm sure. Sometimes the fire has to come full circle." 3 days later, Ava walked into the same building she had once been escorted out of. The same marble floors. The same faint scent of polished wood. And as the elevator rose to the 14th floor, she couldn't help but remember Gregory's voice echoing, "Pack it later? You're a distraction." When the doors opened, Gregory Shaw was waiting by the glass conference room, older, grayer, and visibly strained. He extended his hand. "Ava, Miss Mitchell, you look different." "Success tends to do that," she said, shaking his hand firmly. They sat across from each other. Gregory's team looked nervous. Ava's team looked unshakable. Greg cleared his throat. "We, heard about your incredible growth. Weston and Hale is going through some restructuring. We believe a partnership could be mutually beneficial." Ava listened quietly, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she said softly, "You once told me I was a distraction. Do you still think that?" Greg froze. "Ava, that was..." She raised her hand. "It's fine. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for clarity." She opened her briefcase and slid a document across the table. Gregory picked it up, then blinked in disbelief. It wasn't a partnership proposal. It was a buyout offer. Ava's company, backed by Vanguard Ventures, was offering to purchase Weston and Hale outright. The firm that once destroyed her career was now struggling, and she had the power to save it, or consume it. Gregory's voice faltered. "You're buying us?" Ava leaned forward, her tone calm, controlled. "No, Mr. Shaw. I'm reclaiming what was always mine." The conference room went completely silent. For a long, tense moment, all that could be heard was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of the wall clock behind Gregory Shaw. He sat frozen, reading the buyout document over and over as if the words might change. "Phoenix Media Group," he murmured, his voice low. "You're serious about this?" Ava folded her hands neatly on the table. "Very." Gregory looked up at her, confusion and disbelief mixing on his face. You're offering to buy Weston and Hale? Not offering, Ava corrected smoothly. Acquiring. There's a difference. This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Shaw. It's a decision already made. Lena, sitting beside Ava, slid another folder across the table. Inside were signatures, investors, board members, and Vanguard's official approval. The deal was sealed pending Gregory's acceptance. For the first time since she'd entered, Ava saw fear in his eyes. He leaned back, trying to compose himself. You can't possibly— I can, Ava interrupted softly. And I already did. She stood and walked toward the window overlooking downtown Chicago. The skyline glittered like a crown of glass and light. Her kingdom. When you fired me, she continued, her voice calm but sharp, you said I was a distraction. You humiliated me in front of the team, stripped me of my dignity, and stole my work. The Phoenix campaign was mine. You twisted it, and when it failed, you threw me out. Greg's throat tightened. Ava, I made mistakes. She turned around, her eyes cold but steady. No, Gregory, you made choices. He looked down at the papers again, realizing there was no way out. His company was drowning, debt piling up, clients leaving, investors losing faith. Phoenix Media's offer was the only lifeline. But it came with a cost, his power, his pride. Gregory's voice cracked slightly. And if I refuse? Ava smiled faintly. Then Weston and Hale collapses within 6 months. I'll buy what's left at half the price. Her words carried no malice, only truth. He stared at her for a long moment, then let out a broken sigh. You always were smarter than me. Ava tilted her head. No, Gregory. I was just never afraid to start over. He signed the papers, slowly, defeated. When the last signature was complete, Ava extended her hand once more, the same way he had done years ago when he fired her. Congratulations, Mr. Shaw, she said with a polite smile. You're officially an employee of the Phoenix Group. He tried to laugh, but the sound caught in his throat. Ava turned toward her team. Effective immediately, Weston and Hale will merge under the Phoenix Vanguard Group umbrella. As she walked out, her heels clicked against the marble floor. The same sound Gregory's once had when he humiliated her, only this time the rhythm belonged to power, to justice, to rebirth. The city looked different that night. Chicago's skyline shimmered in gold beneath the fading dusk, and Ava stood on the rooftop of her new headquarters, the Phoenix Tower. The glass reflected her image. Stronger, sharper, no longer the uncertain woman who once sat in that same city crying over rejection. Now she was a symbol and of resilience, of second chances, of the power that comes when pain becomes purpose. Lena joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I can't believe you actually did it, she said, half laughing, half in awe. You own them now. Weston and Hale, the same company that ruined your life. Ava smiled, taking the coffee. It's not about owning them, Lena. It's about proving that fire doesn't destroy you. It refines you. They stood in silence for a while, watching the city below. The wind carried faint sounds of traffic, sirens, and the pulse of a city that never slept. You know, Lena said softly, your story's going to inspire a lot of people. Ava chuckled lightly. Only if they know the truth. Most will just see the success, not the sleepless nights. Not the tears, not the rejections. Lena nodded. Still, it's one hell of a story. Ava turned her gaze to the horizon. I'm not done writing it yet. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from David, her former mentor from the early days of her career. Proud of you, kid. You rose from the ashes like a real phoenix. Ava smiled faintly. That was the first time anyone had said that phrase to her years ago, back when she thought her career was finished. She replied simply, Thank you for believing when no one else did. Just then, her assistant approached. Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. Says his name is Gregory Shaw. Lena's eyes widened. Here, after everything? Ava sighed. Let him in. Moments later, Gregory entered, holding a small box. His posture was humbler now, shoulders slightly bent, voice softer. I came to return this, he said, placing the box on the table. Ava opened it. Inside was a gold-plated nameplate. Ava Miller, Executive Director, Weston and Hale. The same one she had thrown in the trash the day she was fired. Gregory spoke quietly. You earned it back. And a lot more. Ava looked at him, her eyes calm. I didn't earn it back, Greg. I rebuilt it. He nodded slowly. I guess that's what real power looks like. Not revenge, but rebuilding. Ava's voice softened. You're right. And for what it's worth, I don't hate you anymore. Gregory gave a weak smile. Then maybe I can start forgiving myself too. As he left, Ava stood alone again, the city lights glowing beneath her. In her reflection, she saw not just a CEO, but a survivor who turned her scars into armor. The Phoenix didn't rise for revenge. It rose for rebirth. Months passed. The Phoenix Tower was no longer just a name. It was a movement. Every floor buzzed with energy, creativity, and ambition. New interns looked at Ava Miller like she was a legend, the woman who had been fired and came back to own the very company that once threw her out. But Ava never let the power go to her head. Every morning, she took the same elevator, greeted every employee by name, and made sure her team knew that kindness was the strongest currency in business. One Friday morning, her assistant announced a visitor. "Mr. Ellis is here to see you." Ava's face lit up instantly. "Send him in." The old janitor, now retired, his uniform neatly pressed, his eyes warm as ever, entered slowly, holding the same brass key that started it all. "You still have it," she said, smiling. He chuckled. "And you still remember." She stood up, walked over, and hugged him. "I owe you everything. That day I was broken, and you gave me hope, in the form of a key." Mr. Ellis smiled gently. "All I did was remind you who you were. The fire was already inside you." Ava's eyes shimmered. "You know, I kept this key on my desk every single day. It reminds me where I came from, and why I must never forget those who helped me along the way." Mr. Ellis looked around the office. The glass walls, the inspiring quotes, the laughter from her employees. "You've built something special here," he said. Ava nodded softly. "Something honest. Something human." They sat for a while, talking about old times, about the dusty 12th floor, the forgotten whiteboard, and the courage that was born there. When he left, Ava stood by the window again, holding the brass key in her hand. The city gleamed below, alive and endless, just like her journey. Later that evening, she hosted a company event, a celebration of growth and gratitude. She took the stage, microphone in hand, her voice calm but full of fire. "I want everyone here to know something," she said. "Success is not built on revenge. It's built on resilience, on belief, on getting back up every single time life tries to push you down. I was once told that the phoenix burns before it rises. I used to think that fire was punishment. But now I know it's transformation." The room erupted in applause. Tears glistened in more than a few eyes. Ava smiled, raising her glass. "To new beginnings, to those who believed, and to those who didn't, thank you for giving me a reason to rise higher." As the music swelled and laughter filled the air, Ava slipped the brass key back into her pocket, her silent reminder that even from ashes, beauty can be reborn. She didn't just rise, she soared.